100,000 years ago, the sun sets. The savannah turns into a graveyard. You are exposed. The ground is a web of teeth and venom. You don't sleep. You survive. Every rustle in the tall grass is a death sentence. Every cooling shadow is a predator moving into position. The ground wasn't a place for rest. It was a hunting ground for things that don't need light to see you. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors were forced into a cycle of hypervigilance, an exhausting, deadly dance with extinction. They were the most vulnerable creatures on the continent. They were biologically hardwired to fear the dark because, in the dark, the ground took everything from them. If this investigation into how we crawled off the ground changes how you see your own sleep, hit that subscribe button. We open one investigation into human invention every week. We have to understand the environment. The ground was not just dirt, it was a lethal, hyper-competitive ecosystem. It was infested with ectoparasites, ticks, lice, fleas. They were vectors for disease that could wipe out a camp in days. If you laid on the ground, you became a buffet. Your body heat radiated into the soil, acting as a beacon for every crawling thing that thrived in the cool dampness of the night. You were inviting parasites to map your skin. But the parasites were the silent killers. The active killers were the leopards, the hyenas, the lions. They were ambush predators. They relied on you being low, on you being still, on you being unaware. Your ancestors knew that the moment you closed your eyes on the open ground, you were signing your own death warrant. The human body is remarkably defenseless in the dark. We lack the night vision of the cat, the scent sensitivity of the dog, and the armored skin of the reptile. We were soft, slow, and defenseless. But we still had to sleep. The brain requires sleep to consolidate memory, to repair cells, to process the day. But for the ancient human, sleep was a liability. You couldn't just lie down. You had to engineer a solution. You had to change the landscape. This is where the forensic evidence of the first bed emerges. It wasn't about comfort, it was about tactical advantage. It was a desperate, calculated move to reclaim the night. Archaeology shows us that our ancestors began to engineer sleeping platforms. They weren't soft, they weren't luxurious. They were raised, they were insulated, and they were defensible. They took branches, reeds, and grasses, and they stacked them with meticulous intent. They created a barrier between themselves and the biological threat of the ground. They were building a fortress for their bodies. By elevating themselves, they reduced the parasite load significantly. They became harder to reach for ground-dwelling predators. They changed the geometry of their survival. It was a technological breakthrough. It was the first time a human decided that the environment was not something to be merely endured, but something to be mitigated, redesigned, and conquered. It required planning, labor, and collective effort. They were no longer victims of the habitat. They were architects of their own protection. If you are starting to see your own comfort as a survival strategy, smash that like button. It helps this investigation reach more people who need to hear the truth. But this isn't just about survival. It's about the psychological audit. Once they had the bed, they had a space of their own. They had a space where they weren't constantly exposed to the landscape. They had a space where they could be, for the first time, truly, deeply unconscious. And this had a profound effect on the human brain. We are bed creatures now. We are the only species that has outsourced our safety to furniture. We have moved the battle for our lives from the open field to the enclosed room. But look at your own restlessness. Look at your own insomnia. You go into a safe room behind a locked door on a soft bed, and yet your brain still wakes you up at 3 a.m. Your brain is still auditing the dark. It is still listening for the leopard. It is still looking for the parasite. It hasn't forgotten the ground. It is still hard-coded for the apocalypse. The bed was a triumph of engineering, but it created an evolutionary mismatch. We are living in an environment we have engineered for safety, but we are inhabiting bodies designed for constant, mortal fear. The invention of the bed was an evolutionary pivot. It allowed us to sleep deeper, longer, and safer. It gave us the energy to invent, to build, to explore, but it also separated us from the physical reality of our environment. We stopped being part of the landscape. We became observers of it. We traded our sensory awareness for the luxury of unconsciousness. And this trade-off is the source of much of our modern anxiety. We have built ourselves a sanctuary, but we have never quite felt at home in it. We have never quite stopped being afraid of what is in the dark. We are still listening. Our brains have not evolved as fast as our furniture. We carry the ghost of the savannah in our minds, constantly checking for threats that are no longer there. We are prisoners of our own success. We are trapped in a cycle of needing safety and yet being unable to trust the safety we have built. Subscribe to the channel. You're already part of the audit. Think about the way you sleep now. You control the light. You control the temperature. You control the noise. You are trying to replicate the absolute safety that your ancestors were dying to achieve. And yet, you are often more stressed than they were, because your ancestors knew exactly where the threat was. They knew it was the leopard in the grass. You don't know where the threat is. Your anxiety is abstract. Your stress is internal. You are a survival machine built by the apocalypse, waiting for the next one, even in the absolute comfort of your own bedroom. The bed was a fortress, but the war never really ended. We just moved the battlefield into our own heads. The stress that once saved our lives is now dismantling them. We are plagued by chronic tension, not because of a predator, but because of a nervous system that refuses to shut down. We have outrun the leopard, but we cannot outrun our own instincts. The invention of the bed was a milestone in the human narrative. It was an act of defiance against a hostile world. It was a declaration that we would not be consumed by the dark. It was a technological masterpiece that saved our species from extinction. But the forensic evidence suggests that we are still carrying the burden of that vulnerability. We are still the creatures who are afraid of the ground. We are still the creatures who are checking the shadows. We are trapped in a permanent state of semi-alertness. We will continue to check the shadows because that is how we survived. That is the fundamental audit of the human species. Our comfort is our cage. Our safety is our stress. We are the architects of our own unrest. If this file got under your skin, let me know in the comments. When you sleep, do you feel safe? Or are you still waiting for the dark to move? Subscribe, stay on the case, and I'll see you in the next investigation.